Picture the glittering skyline of Hong Kong, a city where immense wealth so often hides the darkest of sins. Here lived Dr. Khaw Kim Sun, a brilliant and highly respected Malaysian doctor. To the outside world, his life was a living masterpiece. He had a devoted wife, 47-year-old Wong Siew Fing, and a bright, beautiful 16-year-old daughter named Lily. They were a picture-perfect family, wrapped comfortably in the security of a prominent doctor's prestige. You would look at them and think they had absolutely everything. But perfection, my dear listener, is a fragile mask. Behind the heavy, locked doors of their home, the air was thick with bitter resentment. The love had long since rotted away, replaced by a cold, suffocating silence. A terrible storm was brewing inside this respected healer. He was a man whose very profession was to preserve human life. Yet deep in the darkest shadows of his calculating mind, he was figuring out exactly how to quietly and invisibly take it away. It was a dreary afternoon when the terrible tragedy spilled into the open. A bright yellow Mini Cooper sat awkwardly parked on the shoulder of a quiet road. Passers-by noticed it, assuming the driver had simply pulled over to rest. Inside sat Siew Fing at the wheel, with young Lily in the passenger seat. Their eyes were closed, heads tilted gently back. They looked so incredibly peaceful, like a mother and daughter taking a cozy nap. But the hours ticked by, and that yellow car never moved an inch. When the police finally arrived and shattered the window glass, a chilling realization washed over them. There was no blood, no signs of a struggle. The mother and daughter were simply dead, their lives stolen by an unseen phantom. The paramedics stood there, utterly baffled. How could two healthy people just slip away in broad daylight? The autopsy reports finally arrived, carrying a chilling revelation. Siew Fing and Lily hadn't just peacefully passed away. Their blood was saturated with lethal amounts of carbon monoxide. An invisible assassin had stolen their breath. Naturally, police suspected a tragic malfunction. Experts tore the yellow Mini Cooper apart, inspecting every pipe and exhaust valve, expecting to find a deadly leak. But they found absolutely nothing. The engine was flawless. The exhaust was intact. There was no mechanical failure whatsoever. A cold shiver ran down the investigators' spines as the horrifying truth dawned. If the car hadn't poisoned them, the deadly vapor was brought inside the cabin deliberately. Someone planted a ghost in that vehicle. But how do you smuggle a lethal cloud of odorless gas into a tiny car without the victims ever noticing? The desperate detectives tore through every inch of that little yellow car, hunting for a hidden poison or a final, tragic note. But the deadly secret was waiting quietly in the boot. When they popped the trunk open, past the everyday clutter, their eyes fell upon something entirely out of place. It was a deflated yoga ball, just a limp, empty sack of rubber resting silently in the dark. At first glance, it meant absolutely nothing, just a forgotten piece of exercise equipment. But seasoned investigators know that the devil hides in the most mundane details. They looked closer. The stopper was completely missing. Slowly, a terrifying, cold realization began to creep over them. This wasn't just a piece of rubber. It was a carefully chosen weapon. A makeshift, silent bomb designed to slowly exhale a lethal, invisible breath into the enclosed cabin. The trail of clues led detectives straight from that quiet roadside to the sterile, brightly lit halls of the university where the doctor worked. When investigators began asking questions, his colleagues remembered something strange. A bizarre, chilling incident that made their blood run cold in hindsight. They recalled seeing the esteemed doctor hunched over in the laboratory, doing something completely, utterly out of character. He was methodically pumping pure carbon monoxide into two large yoga balls. When a curious colleague asked what on earth he was doing, Khaw didn't even blink. He smoothly replied that he was gathering the toxic gas for an upcoming scientific experiment involving rabbits. The colleagues simply nodded, completely trusting the brilliant medical man. They had absolutely no idea that they were watching a cold-blooded killer load his invisible gun. When detectives finally cornered Dr. Khaw, the polished veneer of the respected healer began to violently crack. The brilliant mind that meticulously planned an invisible crime now scrambled, weaving a tangled, desperate web of lies. First, he repeated the absurd story he fed his colleagues, swearing the lethal gas was strictly for an experiment on rabbits. But the police pressed harder, and his composure shattered. He frantically changed his tune, now claiming the heavy carbon monoxide was simply meant to exterminate rats in his home. He stammered out a bizarre excuse, insisting he placed two filled yoga balls in the car, but deliberately deflated one the next day because it was leaking. It was a pathetic, crumbling defense. The detectives just watched his panicked performance with cold eyes. They knew a truly innocent man never needs to invent such frantic, shifting shadows to hide his dark sins. Behind every terrible deed lies a dark, festering root. For the doctor, that root was a toxic blend of lust and absolute desperation. He had strayed far from his vows, plunging into a secretive affair with one of his own young students. He hungered for a fresh start with his lover, but Siew Fing stood like an iron wall in his path. She knew of his betrayals, yet she flatly, stubbornly refused to grant him a divorce. She would not let him destroy their family. Khaw found himself trapped, suffocating under the weight of a marriage he desperately wanted to escape. He couldn't leave legally, and he absolutely refused to stay. In the twisted, cold logic of his brilliant mind, a horrifying solution began to take shape. If she wouldn't sign the papers and set him free, he would just have to erase her entirely. The trap was set with the chilling precision of a seasoned surgeon. Under the cover of ordinary family life, he crept out to Siew Fing's bright yellow Mini Cooper. In his hands, he carried the seemingly innocent yoga ball, now swollen tight with an invisible, suffocating death. He popped the boot open and gently laid the heavy rubber sphere inside, tucking it away in the shadows. Then, with a steady hand that had sworn to do no harm, he reached out and pulled the stopper loose. The faint, silent hiss of pure carbon monoxide began to bleed into the enclosed space. It had no color, no smell, no warning whatsoever. Later that fateful day, Siew Fing and sweet little Lily climbed into the car for a simple drive, completely unaware that they were stepping straight into a sealed tomb built by the man they called husband and father. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. In the year 2015, the polished doctor found himself stripped of his white coat, standing under the harsh, unforgiving lights of a courtroom. The prosecution painted a horrifying masterpiece of betrayal for the jury. They didn't just show a cheating husband. They exposed a terrifying predator who weaponized his own brilliant medical mind. They brought in his colleagues to testify about the strange rabbit experiment. They exposed his frantic, shifting lies about the rats. And most damning of all, they revealed the desperate student lover and the bitter wife who simply refused to let him walk away. The jury sat in stunned silence, staring at a man who took a sacred oath to heal, but instead engineered a flawless, invisible slaughter against the very flesh and blood he was supposed to protect. The gavel finally fell in 2015, echoing through the silent courtroom like a thunderclap. Dr. Khaw Kim Sun was found guilty of double murder. The judge handed down the only sentence fitting for such a calculated betrayal: life in prison behind cold iron bars. But the arrogant doctor refused to accept his fate. For years he sat in his cramped cell, plotting one last move. In 2022, he launched a desperate appeal, begging the court to overturn his sentence. But the judges saw right through his lingering lies, firmly slamming the door shut on his freedom. And so, the chilling tale of the yellow Mini Cooper comes to its grim end. It stands as a stark, terrifying reminder that the most dangerous monsters don't always lurk in dark alleyways. Sometimes, my dear listener, they wear a wedding ring, smile across the dinner table, and hold the very keys to your car.